War talks between the US and Iran are once again at an impasse. Now, I am just wondering, does anyone really know how to end this conflict? Or is this standoff inevitably going to lead to renewed hostilities? Tehran is asking for US war damages and the recognition of Iran's sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. Donald Trump has called that totally unacceptable. So just how close are we to another round of bombing and fighting between the US and Iran?
We are on an escalation ladder at this particular moment, not a de-escalation ladder. And unless there is a way out, unless there is a bridging of the divide between the two sides, it seems to me that we're going to see the ceasefire collapsing.
That's Fawaz Gerges. He's a Lebanese-American author and professor of Middle Eastern politics and international relations at the London School of Economics. Now, together, we're going to look at the state of negotiations between the US and Iran, who's in charge in Tehran, and why that matters to these negotiations, why Israel's Prime Minister says the war is not over yet, and we'll ask if anyone has an answer for how to bring this conflict to an end. But first, let's look at what both sides are demanding. There's been a flurry of social media from both sides. President Trump posted that the latest offer from Iran to end the war with the US was totally unacceptable, in all caps. Iran, in turn, has set out its own demands. So let's look at what Iran says that it wants. Number one, the necessity for the US to pay war damages to Iran. Number two, recognition of Iran's sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. Number three, the end of US sanctions. And finally, the release of Iran's blocked assets by the US. All that according to a tweet put out by Iranian state media. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman says that its proposal to the US was not excessive and that the US continues to have unreasonable demands. So, Fawaz, give us your take on all of this.
Well, I think the big picture is that there's a huge divide between Iran on the one hand and the United States. Another side has been able to bridge their differences and their divisions. We are far away from any diplomatic breakthrough. In fact, if I may describe the situation now, we are in a limbo state. No war and no peace. The ceasefire is fraying, and I could easily see renewal of hostilities. There was a statement very few people really paid attention to by President Trump yesterday. He said he might order another round of attacks on Iran for almost 2 weeks, because he says, quote unquote, that the United States and Israel destroyed only 70% of Iran's strategic assets. And he said it could take 2 weeks to complete the mission. So given the stalemate, given this particular deadlock between the United States and Iran diplomatically, I could easily see a trigger that bring about another round of hostilities, even though I doubt it very much if President Trump wants to order another round of hostilities before his visit to China next week.
Fawaz, I just wanted to ask you about President Trump's visit to China. I mean, how much do you think that Trump wants to have all of this done and dusted before he goes to talk to President Xi in China? Because that's a big factor, isn't it?
Huge. Is a huge fact. In fact, Iran does not really want to give President Trump what he desperately wants, to declare victory before his visit to China next week. Because it seems to me that President Trump now travels to China with a weaker hand. China knows very well that despite all his bluster, despite all his threats, despite everything that he has thrown against Iran, Iran still standing. And Iran is not even a middle power. So President Trump's visit to China is clouded and weighed down by his inability to basically force Iran to accept his demands and his conditions. And this plays into China's hand during talks about various questions with the United States.
President Trump is accusing Iran of playing games with the US. Do you think that's accurate?
Oh, absolutely. And it's really surprising. In fact, Iran is playing very hard. Iran feels it has a strong hand. Iran does not really want to give President Trump the victory he desperately needs. Iran is humiliating the President of the United States, literally humiliating the President of the United States. Here is my qualification. Iran could be overplaying its hand. There are risks to Iran's strategy, because I could easily see President Trump being enraged and angry. And his talks with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, yesterday could basically signal his desire to basically carry out another round of hostilities against Iran. So Iran has to be careful and cautious about pushing Donald Trump too far, because he's very temperamental and he could easily basically lash out angrily and order another round of hostilities against Iran.
Fawaz, we're going to talk about Israel in a moment, but let's just talk more about Iranian leadership. The Wall Street Journal newspaper published a headline saying Iran's supreme leader is missing in action just when negotiators need him most. We still haven't seen Khamenei, have we? According to Iranian state media, though, he is there. He's been briefed by a senior Iranian military officer who has allegedly told him that Iranian forces are, and I'm quoting here, at a high level of preparedness to confront the hostile actions of the American and Zionist enemies. That's a quote. So, Fawaz, who do you think is in charge in Iran right now? Who is coordinating Iran's response? And as you were saying, Iran has to be careful. Tell us more about your thoughts.
Well, I think we know that the new supreme leader, Mujtaba Khamenei, is injured. We do not know the extent of his injuries. We don't really have adequate information, credible information. But based on multiple sources, he seems to be basically coordinating Iran's strategy with the Islamic Revolutionary Guards. Overall, again, the big picture for our viewers, it seems to me that the Revolutionary Guards are basically in charge now. They are managing the war. They are operating in terms of how the war is being conducted. And I think their final word is it, even though the head of the parliament, Qalibaf, and the Iranian foreign minister and other officials who are basically involved in the talks with the United States. But the reality is, behind the scene, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards are calling the shots. They have the final say on the broad contours of what a final settlement is. And we need to remind our viewers that the new supreme leader, Mujtaba Khamenei, had close connections and links to the Islamic Revolutionary Guards before the war had started. In fact, what we know is that the Islamic Revolutionary Guards pushed very hard for the selection of the new supreme leader. So all in all, it seems to me, at the end of the day, a new generation of revolutionary guards, radical revolutionary guards, are really now in charge of how the war is conducted and the broad contours of Iran's diplomatic strategy vis-à-vis the United States and Israel.
Fawaz, where does the Iranian president fit into all of this? I just wanted to bring up a tweet by President Pezeshkian. He writes, "We will never bow our heads before the enemy, and if talk of dialogue or negotiation arises, it does not mean surrender or retreat. Rather, the goal is to uphold the rights of the Iranian nation and to defend national interests with resolute strength." So essentially he's saying there, talking does certainly not mean surrender or retreat. So where is he coming from? What do you think this says about how Iran sees its position in this conflict right now, the balance of power?
Well, I mean, I think you're asking two key questions. First of all, what's the role of the Iranian president? Again, for our own viewers, the president is not the commander-in-chief in Iran. Constitutionally, it's the supreme leader. So the president basically manages foreign policy manages economic politics, domestic politics. But the reality, what we need to understand in Iran now, is that we have a collective decision-making process, which includes the parliament, the Supreme National Security Council, the president, the supreme leader, and of course, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, with the Islamic Revolutionary Guards being at the top of the helm. But again, on Iran, on your question, what we need to understand, Iran is not governed by personalized politics. Iran is a multi-layered, institutionalized theocracy. Iran is a house of many mansions. So you have the presidency, you have the office of the supreme leader, you have the parliament, you have the Supreme National Security Council, and you have, of course, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards. And this tells you a great deal how the United States and Israel miscalculated, gravely miscalculated, because they had basically expected Iran to fall like a ripened fruit at the beginning of the war when they assassinated the supreme leader and most of the top political and military leaders. Here we are now. And you're asking me a question, who is really running Iran? Iran is a very complex decision-making process. And that's why Iran is resilient. Iran is dynamic. If what had happened in Iran had happened in any neighboring countries, the country could have collapsed and imploded. And that's why President Trump probably might take on it, and I hope I am right. I don't think now he will basically engage in any military adventure, because even if he kills more Iranian leaders, Iran will remain standing.
Fawaz, you mentioned the interview that Benjamin Netanyahu had given. Now, Trump said last month that hostilities between the two countries had been terminated, yet the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, contradicted that. He's saying the Iran war is not over and suggesting that Iran still has uranium enrichment sites and ballistic missiles. Now, he was speaking to the CBS 60 Minutes show that aired on Sunday, and he said there's still nuclear material, including uranium, that has to be taken out of Iran. There are still enrichment sites that have to be dismantled. There are still proxies that Iran supports, their ballistic missiles that they still want to produce. Now, that's a very different reading of Iran's capabilities to what we've been getting from the Trump administration. So talk to us about how problematic those comments could be for the US.
Well, very much, very problematic. Benjamin Netanyahu now is really faces a major, uphill battle in the United States. The opinion polls in the United States show a radical shift of opinion, not only towards Benjamin Netanyahu, but also towards Israel as well. That according to the surveys in the United States, multiple surveys, Benjamin Netanyahu really risks, Israel's being seen as a rogue state in the United States itself. And his recent comments, as you said, the interview CBS on 60 Minutes, does not really help Benjamin Netanyahu. And the question of mistrust, because many Americans, including Republicans, including allies of the president, they don't really no longer believe Benjamin Netanyahu, no longer trust Benjamin Netanyahu. But I think, let me focus on the questions you said, Anja. I think there are two major problems between the United States and Iran. The first problem, major problem, is that Iran's right to enrich uranium domestically. This is a major hurdle in the talks between the United States and Iran. Iran wants to have the right to enrich uranium, but it's willing to freeze its right for 10 or 15 years. The United States insists on 20 years of freezing Iran's right to enrich uranium. The second big hurdle is the so-called 900 pounds of highly enriched uranium in Iran. The United States wants the 900 pounds of enriched uranium, it wants them to come back to the United States. Iran refuses. It's willing to export half of the highly enriched uranium to a friendly country like Russia, and it wants to dilute the rest and have the United Nations Nuclear Agency monitor this particular, 200 kilos. of highly enriched uranium. So the nuclear question really lies at the very heart of the divide between the United States and Iran. And what Iran wants, cleverly, intelligently, it wants to focus first on ending the war, opening the Strait of Hormuz, and ending America's basically blockade of its ports. And then, in a month or so, talk with the United States about the remaining difficult questions of the nuclear program. And that's what Donald Trump does not accept, because that would really mean defeat for Donald Trump. Because Americans will say, look, why did you go to war in the first place if you're still talking to Iran about its nuclear program? And that's why the president finds himself in a very, very terrible strategic box.
So, Fawaz, you've clarified. Sorry to interrupt you. You've clarified what Iran wants. You've clarified America's situation. So who knows then how to bring this to an end? Will renewed hostilities between US and Iran, will they be inevitable, given what you've said?
Well, I mean, we could have a limbo state, a state of no war and no peace. And we could have basically limited, rounds of hostilities. But that's exactly what the international community does not really want. The world economy has suffered a great deal. There is also a potential for the disruption of the global energy infrastructure in the Gulf. And the ceasefire is fraying. So you're absolutely correct. Unless there is a breakthrough, or at least a limited agreement on a framework of agreement, we could easily see a creeping basically escalation of tensions between the United States and Israel on the one hand and Iran. We are, let me finally answer your intelligent question by saying we are on an escalation ladder at this particular moment, not a de-escalation ladder. And unless there is a way out, unless there is a bridging of the divide between the two sides, it seems to me that we're gonna see the ceasefire collapsing. If not all-out war, probably limited scale of hostilities between Israel and the United States on the one hand, and Iran and its allies on the other hand.
Thanks to Fawaz Gerges from the London School of Economics for his analysis. So how do you see this conflict ending? Do you think a resumption of the US-Israeli war on Iran is inevitable? How do you think the US president's meeting with China's leader, Xi Jinping, this week will influence the situation and Trump's next move? Let us know in the comments. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. I'm Anja Kueppers-McKinnon. Thanks for watching.